Now I'm going to show you another game. Another game is even more fascinating because White was a strong grandmaster who needed a draw. Imagine these days you are White, you need a draw. What do you usually do? You achieve it comfortably. Yet, he failed, and the reason he failed because he was playing for a draw. Okay, this game was played in the last round of interzonal tournament, 1990. And in order to qualify for the candidates matches, White needs to draw, and Black needs to win. And White is rated 30 FIDE points above Black at the time. White was Gurevich and Black was Nigel short. And of course, Gurevich is an experienced player. FIDE rating 2640. All he needs is a draw. So the game goes D4, E6, E4, D5. You are White, you need a draw. What do you do? Take on D5. And at this point, Gurevich offered him a draw. He's saying, look, I know you want to qualify for interzonal, sorry, for candidates matches from interzonal, but I am White, it's exchange French, my FIDE is 2640, how can you beat me? But Black has to play on. And something very interesting happens. Without making seemingly big mistakes, White ends up in lost position gradually. Takes. And again, it's very hard to identify where White went wrong. Nf3, bishop to G4, H3, bishop to H5, bishop A2, bishop to B6, knight E5, takes. All White is trying to do, exchange all the pieces and make a draw, yes. And he's in the candidates matches. And at this point, he offers a draw for the second time. It's generally impolite to offer a draw 2 times in a row, but just like some people in Melbourne Chess Club, Gurevich doesn't care. He just wants to draw against short, go home, have a big drink, and start preparing for the candidates matches. Knight E7, castles, bishop F4, rook to E8. The position is still dead equal, right? And Black needs to win at all costs. He draws, he gets nowhere. He wins, he goes to candidates matches. Take a look how he doesn't really rush to complicate the matters. One thing I learned over the years is, if you play for a draw, what usually happens? You lose. If you want to draw, what do you need to do? You need to play aggressively. One common mistake that weaker players do, and I don't want to mention any names, but many names come to mind, they just keep playing for a draw. Some of the 2000 to 2100 rated players have quite a few wins over the years and quite a few draws over the years with higher rated players, such as David, for example. How do they achieve it? They play aggressively. They play for win. And if they play for win, they not only win more games, they also draw more games. And if you play for a draw, sooner or later you get outplayed. This is what happened to me a couple of times when I just came to Australia when I was playing against Johansson. Because his style is very positional. So I thought it's really easy to play for a draw against him. And with White usually it was not much of an issue. But one thing I discovered with Black, you go into slightly inferior position and you are sure at some point you are going to draw. And what would happen every time? I lost about 3 games like this. He just gradually outplays me because I'm not able to generate any active counterplay, and he slowly but surely exploits his small advantages because he's more experienced than me and he's a stronger player than me. What happens in this case? Gurevich in short at the time, as I said, Gurevich was rated even above short, so it's not that he was a weaker player, but he just wanted to draw way too much. He's a strong player. If he plays normally, there is no reason why he should lose to short. But he really wants a draw, and he wants to exchange all the pieces to get a draw. And he doesn't care whether he's exchanging the good pieces or the bad pieces, he just wants to exchange everything. Which is not a good strategy. Okay, Queen G4.
When we play Queen B5.
Hold on. Why doesn't he play Queen B5? That's another interesting question. He can probably play...
A scary move.
This is actually maybe a better move. At least it's an interesting move to consider. I think the reason is you can take on B7, but then black also gets some play.
Interesting move.
Hold on. But given that this is a king, and this is a queen, this is not a check. So what you are trying to do, you are just trying to attack my B7 pawn, yes?
Yes.
Good attempt. Yeah.
So, what if I just play B6, for example? I don't think you have to sacrifice
We have a
it.
hole there, we exploit it somewhere.
Which pawn?
C6.
Well,
Knight C3.
I can play C6 later.
Knight C3.
I have two knights on E7 and B8, I can play C6 later.
Yeah.
Knight C3, Michael.
Here?
Yeah.
Okay.
Put pressure on the pawn.
Well, I just play C6 and there's no pressure.
Okay.
Knight C3, C6. Another point is, he is not trying to unbalance the position. Moves like Queen B5 mean that you are starting to play for advantage, so you are trying to get the position unbalanced. But what Gurevich is trying to do, he doesn't want unbalanced position. He just wants to exchange everything, make a draw and go home. And of course there are many other moves. You can play maybe C4. You can play Knight C3, but he just wants to keep exchanging pieces. He needs a draw. So Queen G4. And short doesn't seem to mind. Bishop takes C5. Bishop takes C5. Knight to G6. Bishop to G3. Knight to D7. Still, the position appears to be equal. And objectively, it probably is equal. But have you noticed that black knights have some squares for penetration?
Yeah.
And white bishop on G3, it's not looking that sexy anymore. In open or semi-open positions, bishops are supposed to be better than knights. But what about this position? Is this bishop doing much? Not really. So already, white is posed with some problems. Can white draw from here with accurate play? Yes, of course. But already he starts feeling a little bit uncomfortable. And when you really want to draw, and suddenly you realize your position is getting a little bit worse, it makes you feel very, very uncomfortable. Knight to D2, Knight to F6, Queen to F3, C6. White is playing without a plan. Fairly strong grandmaster, but he plays without a plan. Why? Because all he wants is a draw. Would he also need to win? I'm sure he would think of something and probably wouldn't lose. Lots of, again, lots of things white can try to do. Maybe open up first, so the bishop can come into life. But
I thought his plan was to swap all the pieces.
yeah, his plan is to swap all the pieces and draw.
Yeah.
But the problem is he already swapped some pieces, and he's left with the bishop, which is not so great. And then if black knight comes to e4, black will have some space advantage and control over some important squares.
What about that bishop on G3? So
Bishop on G3, it looks good because it controls the big diagonal. And of course players like me who play London sometimes, they generally like having this kind of bishop. But the reality is, what squares is the bishop attacking?
empty space.
Empty space, yes. And again, if you want to play aggressively, maybe you can even play rook d1 and c4 and play with isolated pawn and give black a chance to get his knight on d5. But then your knight gets active and bishop, gets control over d6 square and supports the knight there. But for this you need to open things up. For this you need to take some risks. And this is what's going to make black very happy because he needs to play for win. And by the way, that was the starting point for short to get to his match to Kasparov. He won this game, then he won the candidates matches, then he got to play Kasparov. And his candidate matches wins, including a win over Karpov, who was legendary at the time. I think young generation of players don't even imagine what kind of player Karpov was, because for them Karpov was an old guy who was still one of the leading players in the world. But I remember I was growing up and learning chess, following up the great matches between Karpov and Kasparov. And at the time they were the two superstars, and Karpov was as big as Kasparov. So Queen B3, Queen B6. If you have a small advantage, it's okay to exchange pieces as long as the advantage is going to be increased. But very brave decision by Short, given the tournament situation. He says, okay, as long as I believe I'm improving my position, I'm not afraid of exchanging pieces. And this is one thing we can learn from this game. Don't be afraid of simple positions, guys. Don't be afraid of exchanging pieces. Many people feel that if they exchange too many pieces playing against lower rated players, it's going to be a draw. As long as you have an advantage, it's very enjoyable to play on in these positions. In these kind of positions where it's half drawn, half winning, what usually happens is you win. Why? It's much easier to win a position which is half winning, half drawing than it is to draw. Very hard to draw inferior position, particularly if you have to defend over many moves. When you're in a better position, don't give your opponents a chance to play any forced lines. Just keep the pressure on. Sooner or later they are going to crack and start complaining in Krunic style that they had a draw. Of course, some people are even worse. I can think of somebody who is even a much stronger player than Krunic, but every time he loses, he said that he had a winning position. And he's even an international master. We won't name him, even though I don't think he watches videos on YouTube. A3, knight to E4, takes. What does black do? He needs to win, and what is he doing? He's exchanging pieces. Rook to D1, B5. Can you see what happens? The bishop is totally out of place, and the knight is getting more and more squares to occupy. How beautiful. B5, king f1, f6, allowing the king to come in, f3, rook f6.
Instead of F6, F5, no?
F5, okay. You can always play F5 later, but possibly you want to keep F5 square for the knight, and possibly for the king. It's good to be flexible, it's good to keep your options open. So F5 is playable, but why? You can always play it later. And after rook a6, already, I think it is transparent that black is better. White plays rook a1 and offers a draw for the third time. And nobody exactly knows what Short said to Gurevich after this, but according to some witnesses who could overhear the conversation, it was not a very polite response. He didn't say, excuse me, would you kindly not offer me draw every 3 moves? Apparently he said something else. According to Grandmaster Bareev, who was sitting next to them, he learned a couple of new English words, which he wished he never learned from Short's response. Short is very good at it. Okay, rook a1. King f7. Takes. Yay, white is exchanging more pieces. How great. Pieces keep disappearing from the board. So is he getting closer to the draw?
Maybe with the pawn on F5, as you suggested. Now, again, but I think that you suggested F5.
First
The
just-
bishop has a dead square.
We can always play f5 later, but why not keep the square for the knight? The knight can attack on d4.
All
Okay,
right,
let's keep for the king.
yeah.
Let's keep the options open. We can always play f5 later. Always good to keep the opponent guessing.
Yeah.
King to e6. Yeah. Rook to e1. King to d7. King to E2. H5. On the queen side, black already controls most of the critical squares. Now, off to king side, occupying some space. See, he's not in a hurry. He's really desperate to win, because it's a very important game, one of the games of his life as it turned out, but he's not in a hurry. So when you are doing something important in life, don't hurry. King to D3, H4. Getting more space. Now, can we move bishop to F2? No, because Nd4 check is coming. So now bishop has to go to very passive H2 square. Bishop H2, knight to E7, bishop F4. Now knight comes to F5. Yeah? We need the square for the knight. Now, black square is a bit weak. D4 pawn a bit weak. We have space on king side, we have space on queen side. What did white go wrong?
Taking the queen for a start.
Well, it doesn't look like a mistake. So white plays seemingly normal moves, and now he ends up in the bad endgame, bad bishop against good knight.
Mike, can I ask you one question,
sure.
please? In the case of moving the knight, what about the G5? Push the G5.
Push to G5.
Yeah, squeeze the bishop. That's the whole
You can play
plan.
G5, but you can also play G5 later. Unless
Okay.
something is pressing, don't play it yet. Keep your options open.
Okay.
Also, if you play G5, bishop will move back.
But you have a good control of the dark squares.
You can play it later.
Yeah.
Always good to delay forcing moves if you can. Keep your opponent guessing. It's a bit like, you know, soccer penalty shootout. You try not to indicate which corner you are going to shoot at, because keep him guessing. So knight f5, bishop d2, b6. Again, possibly c5, but possibly not. All I'm doing by playing d6, I'm saying I want to play c5. But maybe I won't play c5. So this is the idea. You build up the possibilities of the threats. And then at some point you decide which one you want to go ahead with. Rook to e2, c5, bishop e3, and now the time comes for going offensive. Now b4. We got our knight to an active square. We brought our king to the center. We put our rook on the file that may get opened up. And now we can open up, yes? We got black bishop, white bishop passive. Rook is not going anywhere. Perfect time to open up the position. Our patience is getting rewarded. Takes. c4 check. Sacrificing a pawn, but not for long. King to c3. Knight to d6. Look at the knight and look at the bishop. What about extra pawn? Does it really matter here? Not really. And we have control over the open file. How nice. Rook to e1. Rook to a4. King d2. Getting the pawn back. Rooks to b4. What to do? Can you defend this pawn? You can play king c3, but then rook a4 with the idea of knight b5 check.
Rook a1.
Rook a1, yes. Trying to get active instead. This is what Gurevich did. Rook takes b2 and rook a7, yeah? Yeah, that's what he did. He's trying to create some play. King a6. Rook takes g7. b5. How to stop these pawns? Bishop f2. b4. Now Shot doesn't care about the king side. He just wants to win one of his pawns. King c1. c3. Bishop takes h4, which was a blunder,
And
And?
Rook
knight f5.
I2.
Yeah,
Fucking yeah.
No,
No,
yeah, and he resigned.
Why Rook?
Because if rook h7, knight takes d4.
Okay.
So game is finished, then c2 falls. Otherwise you lose a piece. Of course, this is a blunder, which brought the blacks win forward and the whites win game. But what can you do here?
H4.
Pawns on H4.
Sorry, pawn is on h4. What can you do here?
But white was losing. This stage is dying.
Of course, he's completely
dying
finished.
completely. No
Yes.
excuse.
Yes, exactly.
Rook A2 is a big threat.
Another threat is maybe knight b5 and knight h3. That's another big threat. If I win c pawn, I don't care what else you do, I just win my pawns or possibly even mate you. So white, very strong grandmaster. Where did he go wrong? Of course, you can probably find some minor mistakes, but did he make any major mistakes?
Except the last move.
Well, except the last move. Last move was obviously a blunder, but position already clearly losing.
I think his major mistake or main mistake, he started from an
Yeah.
attitude of playing for a draw
Yeah.
the whole game, and he kept, you know, I mean, didn't have a winning ideology in his mind,
Absolutely.
idea. Yeah, well, that's it. He
When I-
harvests the results of his mind. He lost.
When I was downloading the game to print, I took a look at the players' ratings. At the time of the game, Shot's rating was 2610. Gurevich, who is white, his FIDE was 2640. In 1990, when the game was played, 2640 is equivalent of something like 2770, 2780 today. So he was one of the top 10 players in the world. Why did he play like this? Because he really wanted a draw. He's an expert in French defense. He himself plays French defense for 40 years. Why does he exchange on d5? Why does he just try to exchange all pieces? Exchanging all his good pieces and leaving himself with a bad black square bishop? Because too much pressure and he just wants a draw. And he thinks with white, exchange variation of French, he should be able to draw. So,
Is that the same Gurevich that Johansson drew with?
the same Gurevich that Johansson drew with? Yes, that's the same Gurevich that Johansson drew with, and the same Gurevich that Johansson lost the second game to. I think this is one of the big problems with Australian players. When they play with top players internationally, they don't quite understand positional chess of the highest level. Because a few weeks ago there was a lecture here by Henkin, and one of the things that Henkin said, and I think it's really important for us to learn from, he said that Australian players are really resourceful. They're really good tactically, but even top players like Zhao and Smerdon, when it comes to positional chess, they still have a lot of significant weaknesses, and often they don't think about chess positions in positional terms. They always look for tactics. And when you play with each other, it probably works, but when you play against people who got proper chess schooling, it's very, very hard. One of the things that Henkin was doing here in Australia, he was giving chess lessons to Zhao. Zhao is 25 federated GM. But still, he could benefit a lot from chess lessons, from somebody who's a good positional player, because this is really one fundamental issue. You cannot just calculate on every move. Sometimes you just need to stop over, assess the position, and try to identify a plan. And with many very talented players, I discovered that planning is a big issue. Because we're making a video here, I'm not going to give you the names of people who I believe are talented, good tactical players, but positionally they're totally useless. But I can think of one FIDE master. He's a very talented tactical player. He won many games with brilliant combinations. But then when I see him playing endgames sometimes, I'm quite amazed. In Moscow Chess Club, they would see him playing endgame like this, they would kick him out through the window. They would tell him, go to the village and play with village kids. You teach them read and write, in exchange they teach you to play endgames. and of course it's a very harsh kind of thing to say, but this is quite amazing. Now his rating is quite low. At his best his FIDE was about 2350. So despite his positional deficiencies, he was a very, very strong player. I can recall looking up his games in chess database before preparing to play against him one time, and I discovered that his best he drew with Hort, he drew with Torre, he had some other good games. So he's a strong player. It's just that positionally he cannot play very well. Because these days, if you want to be successful, no matter what your playing style is, you have to be multi-skilled. You have to be able to handle all kind of positions. If you look at the top Australian players now, the upcoming players, James, Max Illingworth, Bobby Chan, what do they have in common? Some of them can be identified as tactical players, but look how well they play endgames. I think Bobby is playing for tactical tricks, right? Most of the time. James is also a tactical player, but look how well both of them are playing endgames. Usually they both play endgames quite well. And they have to, because this is the way chess is today. You cannot be one-dimensional player like some players before. There used to be guys like Qxe2. Qxe2 was very famous in his time. He was a brilliant tactical player. He had tactical wins over Karpov, Kasparov and many others. At the same time, he couldn't handle endgames at all. I remember around 1989, last round of a tournament in Spain, he was playing against Kemsky. And it's an endgame, 2 pawns up. And he couldn't win, it was a draw. It was a theoretically winning endgame, he just didn't know how to win. A book endgame, and he was a strong grandmaster at the time. He was about 25, 40 maybe. Yeah? And so this is, I think, a very big issue for all of us, to not just try to calculate on every move, but try to plan it and try to restrict opponent's play and accumulate small advantages.